All right, Fatty, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Theo, you there?
I'm here.
Introducing authentic realness. 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 Hello, again. We are back for another episode of our Authentic Realness podcast. It definitely seems like it's been a while, and we have skipped a week. Certainly, on the personal front, there's a lot of things that have gone on since I last spoke with you all. And I'll just have a moment of transparency where I did have a death in my family. So, my dear, near first cousin Shontay passed away. And it certainly has been a trying time for my family, but we certainly have been trusting God and will continue to. Certainly want to honor her with this episode because she is someone who had been supporting me. She certainly was like a sister to me. And as her mother, my aunt has so eloquently said, that we are making every attempt to allow the memories to be our treasures. And I would really implore all of the listeners to really ensure that you recognize the preciousness of life, and that if there's anything that you desire to do, say, etc., that you do it. Because one of the things about life is it's an amazing and great journey, yet none of us know our end. And as I think of Shantae, she was 39, preparing to turn 40 this year, and was very excited about a birthday celebration here in South Florida. And actually, on the day of her passing, she had just sent out the full itinerary of all the things that we'd be doing in August. We have made the decision that we are going to honor her by continuing to have that celebration, and just trusting God that it will be everything that she desired for it to be and more. So, certainly, I would request the prayers of the righteous and those who truly know God and know how to pray in the name of Jesus Christ. We certainly, as a family, would truly request those prayers because it is a difficult time for my family and I. So, with that, I want to provide an opportunity, both Fabi and Theo, if there's anything that you all would like to say in response to that, and or anything else before we jump into tonight's topic. So, Fabi, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think for me, it's like you said, Aaron. Really, just taking each day as a gift because it is a gift, and
Mm-hmm.
ensuring that we are constantly keeping in touch with our family and reaching out. Just because you do never know when it is the last time, and it's when things like this unfortunately happen that we really realize that. So I also want to again express my condolences to you and your family during this hard time, and just continue to pray for you and your family, and keeping Shantae in prayer as well.
Thank you much. And we greatly appreciate that, Fabi. And thank you for your continual reaching out during that time. It certainly meant a lot to me and my family. So we greatly appreciate that. Theo, what about for you, brother?
Same here. Same sentiments I can echo with what Fabi said and what you said already. But we definitely want to extend the condolences to your family. And I can honestly say death is one of those things where you really don't have a timeline of when you're going to be okay.
Right.
It's like one of those things where you wake up every day and it's fresh because that's the one thing in life that you know is definite and
Mm-hmm.
is and it's like it's no do overs, it's no
Mm-hmm.
changes. It's
Mm-hmm.
like over, it's over. And it's the one thing that you have to face that's definite in life, and it's I'm not gonna say it's a scary place to be in, but it's a surreal place to be in because it's like that's it,
Mm-hmm.
like the stops here. So I definitely will keep your family in prayer, but to the listeners, like Fabi said, spend time with your loved ones. You
Mm-hmm.
never know when time is here. You never know when their time is here, and don't do it just because you're looking at their meter running out because your cousin was fairly young.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, people think, oh, I'm old age, but it doesn't matter what your age is when your time is your time. So make sure you're spending time with your loved ones and you living life spectacular, as my brother Plush states every day, like you giving your life your best every day.
Mhm.
Because once that time runs out, that's it.
Yeah, and I tell you, Theo, one of the great things about what you're saying is that there is an answer. That although there's a definitiveness of death and there's a definite component of death, but we serve a constant God. And when you look at it from a vantage point of having a constant God, we can rest assured that for the living, we will get through these situations because God knows what he's doing. He makes no mistakes. And that the answer is to truly lean on God completely and totally in these times. But I'd also say, on the lines of what you were saying about living life to the fullest and having a spectacular life, that really cannot be in just lip service. You really have to do that. And that's an action. That's a being very intentional, being very deliberate in understanding the preciousness of life and knowing that we really do have to take this thing moment by moment, or as one of my cousins has so eloquently been saying within the past 2 weeks, it's second by second. So often we'd like to say day by day, but a lot of times we need to take it even several steps further down. We've got that lowest common denominator, maybe be milliseconds, that we truly look at this life thing from that vantage point. So thank you both. And we certainly don't want this to be a session of gloom and doom, because I tell you all, Shontay was so full of life and loved a good laugh and was so jovial and so happy. And I am certain that she would want us to carry on, and she would want us to carry on in a tremendous and great way. So I definitely dedicate this particular episode to her and allowing her to continue to impact my life from a vantage point of ensuring that I do all things with the spirit of excellence. So in all of that, life still continues here. And our topic for tonight, we're going to jump right in. And that topic for tonight, and I kind of started this discussion on LinkedIn and alluded to this article, which talked about companies that are actually going through the process of rescinding offers of employment based upon the selected applicant and candidate going through a negotiation process. And the particular article that I shared, it gave a very specific example. The woman was talking about her experience, and there were even folks chiming in on, from a subject matter expert perspective, kind of how to view it and how to potentially navigate such situations in the future. What I didn't allude to in the LinkedIn post, because I wanted to save it for this episode, is that this is something I'm currently going through myself. I will keep it classy and I will be plush because that's who I am at all times. So at this point, I will not name the company, but I will say it's been a very interesting experience where, though I'm a consultant, I still yet consider full-time opportunities as well. And this was a full-time opportunity that I had been offered the role and received the email of the offer, was having a conversation with the HR representative, and was very clear that I was willing and open to accepting the role where it was being offered, but certainly wanted to look at potential opportunities. So went through that process and had a follow-up discussion with the HR representative the following day. Things going really well. She's like, hey, I don't have an update from the head of HR or the hiring manager, but let's talk on Monday. So Monday comes around and we have a set time of 4:30 p.m. Eastern, and I don't get a call. So in turn, I give her about 30 minutes and I reach out myself at 5, did not get a response. Well, this was a particular role that, although it was a permanent placement role, it was through an agency because the agency was helping this particular company with their hiring processes. And in that, I got a call from the agency who had not been involved in the negotiation process at all, saying, oh, well, hey, just want to give you an update that this company has decided that they're going to rescind the offer. And certainly at that point, for me, and particularly Theo, you and Fabi, you both know me, that my constant is God. And with God being my constant, my immediate response was simply that it wasn't meant to be. Yet, one of the things that God has done in me is he's provided me the opportunity to have a spirit of boldness. And in that, I spoke with the representative from the agency and told her that although it was not illegal, it was definitely unethical. And I had serious concerns about the practices from both them, the agency, as well as the company that they were represented. The good news is, because I'm relatively connected, I knew some higher ups within the organization which represented the agency, reached out to those individuals and gave them my concerns. They immediately connected me to some other folks, and I had some conversations with them. But I also was afforded the opportunity where I had a conversation with the hiring manager. I reached out to her on LinkedIn, and she called me. And we had a conversation, and I was very direct with her and told her that, again, although this is not illegal, it's definitely unethical. And she got to a point where she's like, oh, well, we can end this conversation. No, we're not going to end the conversation. We'll end the conversation when I'm done, because I need you to be aware of the implications and the impact of what you're doing. And she was gracious enough to stay on because she knew that I meant business. And in her mind, she left the call very much so taken aback and unfriended me on LinkedIn, etc. So we're at the point now where this process is still going on. The reason why I'm sharing this with such candor, though, is to prayerfully have an impact on those persons that might be earlier in career, prayerfully to have an impact on HR professionals, prayerfully to have an impact on agencies that are working with companies, prayerfully to have an impact on companies to understand in very certain terms that the implications of decisions that are made are always greater than you. And when you don't know, it's best to ask. And in that process, you always want to treat humans as humans. Because for me, where this process could have been easily resolved is coming back and saying, hey, Mr. Plush, we've looked at the offer. There's no further flexibility. The offer is what it is. Do you accept at this? And my answer would have been yes or no. I wasn't afforded that. So therefore, I felt a significant need to ensure that all parties understood the vantage point in which I was coming from. And I am certain that no one else will have the experience that I've had with these individuals going forward. Now, do I stop here? No. There are some conversations that I'm having with other individuals to identify how I should approach this, and I'm going to leave it there. But I do want to put companies on notice that this is something that must stop. That if you know that you're not prepared to make an offer, don't make it. If you know that you're not certain of a process, then ask. But it's definitely unacceptable to be in a position where anyone has the experience that I have. So Fabi and Theo, I'm going to open the floor to you all. And Theo, I'll start with you. Any immediate thoughts that you have?
You know, the immediate thing for me is inspiration. Because, you know, a lot of times when situations like this arrives, the usual thing of what people do is just be like, oh, you know what, I'm going to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
even worse, you accept the first thing that comes to you.
Mm-hmm.
When you know your skill set and your worth is far more valuable than that.
Absolutely.
So, you know, it's just for me, it's very eye-opening. And as you alluded, that this is something that you're going through. Actually, that's something that I'm stepping into as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very eye-opening, and I don't know, I just feel a little indifferent.
Got it. And I tell you, Theo, it's one of those things where there's a time and place, and there's a way to do all things.
Mm-hmm.
And in this, for me, there is a way to negotiate. And I know that I negotiate very well because I didn't make any demands. I didn't make any specific stipulations. I made it very clear that I was open to accepting the offer as is, just wanted to have an additional conversation around what the other possibilities are. Left the door open for a conversation. Now, what it led me to know is in the way that this hiring manager handled the situation, in the way that the HR representative handled the situation, in the way that the HR lead led this situation, and most importantly, that these representatives of this company represented the company in the way that they did, I would not have been a good fit. I laughed with Fabi a bit about this particular hiring manager being quote unquote my boss. That would not have been a good experience for her, because clearly she's looking for peons and individuals who are going to just quote unquote do what is said, versus being the professionals that they are, that can present the subject matter expertise of what they know, and even oftentimes will challenge her in what she's doing, to recognize that it's not about her or the individual, but what is best for the company. So in turn, I know for certain I dodged a bullet. And I know that there was a lesson in all of this for all of us. But I truly want the listeners to be in a place where this progresses this conversation. And it really allows people to understand that when you trust God, you don't have to bow down. When you trust God, you don't have to be in a situation like, oh, this feels uncomfortable. It didn't feel uncomfortable to me at all. It was very comfortable, because right is right and wrong is wrong. And I don't care what the situation is. Things need to be handled appropriately. Fabi, what's on your mind, my friend?
Yeah, so for me, this conversation obviously hits home a little bit, because in the space that I work in, I am very much so about candidate experience. And nothing bothers me more when candidates do not have a good experience. I think in the past 3 years, since the start of the pandemic, this has just been an ongoing issue that has continued to get worse, in my opinion. And I don't know what is being done to rectify the issue. So I have a couple problems with this situation, because I feel my whole thing is like, treat others how you would want to be treated.
Absolutely.
So if people reverse the situation and put that on themselves, would you want someone to do that to you?
Right.
I just feel like that is a horrible experience, and that's a horrible thing for a candidate to go through. And I just don't understand why people are not more open and honest about the situation. If negotiation is not allowed in that specific job, then that needs to be mentioned up front, because you should never be put in a situation where you cannot negotiate, especially in these times. So that's, to me, like, number one. Number two is, from a hiring manager perspective, I think that there needs to be a little bit more transparency. And I just don't like the way that the whole situation was handled with your case specifically. But yeah, as you can tell, I just had a loss for words, because it really just upsets me, because I just feel like the candidate experience has gone out the window. And I don't feel like people understand just the basics of respect and how that they would want to be treated. I did also want to mention, and I'm losing my train of thought, that I don't want this to discourage people from negotiating.
Absolutely.
But I do think that there's ways to. You, of course, did nothing wrong. But I think now that I've heard this story so much, I almost want to encourage folks to ask in the beginning, is this job, like, are you able to negotiate the salary? Because I do feel that that can hopefully prevent a lot of issues. I don't know if people are going to be as transparent about that, but I'm just trying to figure out ways that folks can prevent themselves from being in that situation. And if that's maybe just asking that question up front, then so be it, because it's a waste of your time. If you would have known in the beginning that the salary was negotiable, then you could have made the decision for yourself. But if it was a no and the salary was too low, you wouldn't even have gone through that whole process. And I just feel like at this point in time, people do not have time to be wasting doing job interviews that not align to their salary. So obviously I can go on a rant about this, but it's just really upsetting. But I'm happy that we're bold, and I know that's something that you always encourage me to do, and spoke your truth, because I do feel like this is a constant thing and folks aren't really speaking up. And I'm glad that you had the opportunity to speak to the agency and to the hiring manager and let them know that this is not okay, and hopefully that does not happen to anyone else.
Absolutely. And I tell you, Fabi, like, even from a negotiation perspective, and we can definitely do another session on this, it's beyond salary. Like, for me, everything's on the table when it comes to going into a new role, because one of the things that you have to understand is the interview process is definitely twofold.
Right.
You should be interviewing the company as the company is interviewing you. All situations are not a good fit.
Right.
And this whole thought that it's a level of the company owns you has to end.
Right.
It's a mutually beneficial situation. Company X benefits by Aaron Plush being an employee there. Aaron Plush benefits by being employee at Company X. Period, point blank. And in turn, there has to be that mutual respect. For me, as I've said, I want to be very clear that I'm not leaving this session like, oh, woe is me. This should have never happened to me. I can't believe it's happened to me. I just thank God for allowing me to have one more experience on my tool belt that I can now candidly talk about. Because I can tell you before this experience, I'd have been like, absolutely not. A company would not be silly enough to rescind an offer just because of a negotiation from a candidate. That's insane. Because that also tells me that there likely is a dictatorship in the work. None of us go to work that are professionals that have any level of intelligence to go there just to push paper, to just go do exactly what you're told to do. Here are the 15 steps, Abby, that you're prescribed to do. Do these 15 steps, and that's your job. No, you bring an expertise that the company doesn't have, meaning you're an asset. So I say all of that to say that from a holistic perspective, this has been a lesson learned for me. I pray that it will grow the listeners and it will provide an opportunity for us all to learn together. Now, as for me as a consultant, this is definitely another one of those items that just allows me to understand how to work with my clients, but also for me to understand how to work with any consultants I might be partnering with. Because Fabi, you definitely were tap dancing in an area that is so important, and that goes back to a large part of those golden rule concepts of life. Nothing to do with employment, nothing to do with consulting, but has everything to do with us as humans. Treat other folks the way that you'd like to be treated. And a component that I've recently heard in that same vein, which I love, was treating folks the way that they want to be treated. And that takes a lot for many of us to be able to get over self and say, okay, I'm going to treat Fabi the way that I'd like to be treated, but I'm also going to treat Fabi the way Fabi wants to be treated. That's growth. That's development. That's awareness. That's being intentional. That's being deliberate. So there's so much from this episode that relates to me holistically as a being, as a person, as a human. And yet I pray that it does the same thing for all of the listeners that are listening to this particular episode. We're at a point here where I don't want to beat a dead horse and don't want to necessarily dive into this any further. But we will have a future session about negotiating in general and the art of it, as well as I'll keep you all posted on how this progresses and where it goes. Fabi, I'll give you an opportunity to give any concluding and closing thoughts for tonight.
I would, I I know I mentioned this earlier, but I do think that I would recommend for folks to ask these questions up front
Yeah.
because I think it would save you a lot of headache and time going forward.
Mhm.
But also folks that maybe this has happened to be bold and stand up for yourself and hold these people accountable.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like there needs to be accountability in this as well. So, and I, again, don't let this discourage you from negotiating because I do also feel that we're in a time where people are a little bit more flexible in what they would typically not settle for, but don't let something like this allow you to push back on what it is that you truly want.
Correct. Theo, closing thoughts, sir.
Speak up for yourself. That's the biggest thing. When you know your value, you know your worth. Speak up for yourself. And it's not a thing of being arrogant or a thing of being malicious, but just speak up for yourself. If you don't speak up for yourself, who can you expect to speak up for you? And always lead with a sense of integrity. You know, when Plush gave his story, the biggest thing that stuck out for me was he came from an integral place, a place of let's lay this thing out on the table and let's get to an understanding of things. When you come from an integral place, nobody can stop you. So this is a setup, and I speak that it's a setup for something even bigger for you and bigger for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. And I am certain that every life experience that all of us have, all of us, it's for a reason. It's just a matter of trusting God and truly hearing from Him as to what the reason is and where He's leading us. In that, let's look to the Lord. Heavenly Father God, we come before you right now, just thanking you, God, for who you are. God, we thank you for the transparency of tonight's episode. We thank you for allowing there to be an acknowledgement of my cousin Shontay and that we continue to lift my family up. We thank you, God, for the opportunity to display the connection between the rescinded job offer to me as a consultant, as well as the many lessons learned for all of us through this process. God, I'd ask that you would even touch those individuals that were involved in this process and that they might see the fallacy of what they were doing and have done, and that they would be better positioned in the future to conduct themselves in a way that's appropriate. And God, that appropriateness is so much beyond the workplace, as you know. It's just the appropriateness of us as beings. God, I would just ask that you would lift up the company that has these individuals representing them, and that the company might become aware of what's happening if it's not aligned. I would ask that you would impact the agency that's working with this company as well, that they too might govern themselves accordingly. And God, I would just ask that you would allow this situation to be one that we all might think and grow from. God, as we look at this dark, dark world that we're living in, we would ask that you just bring light. We think about the continual mass shootings that are still yet occurring, that we just had yet another one that occurred here in South Florida, in Hollywood, Florida. People are just out for the Memorial Day holiday, and lo and behold, here's a shootout. I understand that there was also a shootout in Jacksonville Beach as well. So, God, these are just some horrible, from just ridiculous times. But we know that you are still yet the light of the world. We still yet trust you. We still yet know that you know what you're doing. And that's where we're truly going to rest our cares, God. It's upon you. So, God, I would just ask that you would continue to allow this podcast to grow, that you would impact the listeners, that you would have there to be revelation from this episode and every episode, that Theo, Fabi, and I would continue to lead these sessions with the spirit of excellence, and that we would do it in decency and in order. God, I'd ask that you would just continue to cover the world, because certainly, God, we need it. So, God, we love you, we adore you, we magnify you, and it's in the name of your son, Jesus, that we pray. Amen. All righty. So to our listeners, as we say week in and week out, the greatest part of this Authentic Realness podcast, ARP, is each and every one of Realness. You. So we thank you for your support. We thank you for your continual following. We thank you for even your critical comments, just everything that you are sharing with us. We thank you for it. We'd also ask that you would continue to share these episodes with all of your contacts, because we want to make sure that we're reaching as many ears as we can. For those of you who are considering launching your own podcast, because quite a few of you I've heard from, I implore you to consider Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout, yet again, is the platform that I use. And one of the things that I love about my team is that when we upload, Buzzsprout actually sends it out to so many other platforms for us to reach more ears. So completely and totally, we stand behind the Buzzsprout product and would implore you to consider it for your podcast needs. And in our usual and typical fashion, as we end every episode, until next time, let us all be spectacular together.
Realness.